All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Lions Talk Live Sunday night edition. We're going to talk about about the NFL draft that just concluded yesterday. We got a couple people with us to break it all down for you. Go pick by pick. Talk about the NFC North, the impact the draft has on it. Starting off the bat is going to be the Sarge Tony Libretto coming after us, talking to us about the draft, and we also have Peter, a YouTuber from the Minnesota Vikings, who's going to jump on in, break down the NFC North, talk to us, give his insights on how the draft has impacted not only the Vikings, his views on how it's changed the Lions and Chicago Bears, and of course the Green Bay Packers. So let's start this all off. Let's get going. Let's start at the top with pick number 1. I tell you what, Peter, you're on the outside looking in here. What did you think of the Lions selection of Gibbs at number 12?
Well, when it happened, obviously I was streaming, I'm sure like most people were watching. I was shook. I was like 12 for Jahmyr Gibbs. That seemed very high. But then again, we had Bijan go at number 8, which was also very surprising. So it seemed like, okay, there's now a premium on running backs. I don't hate the pick. They managed to flip Swift, which was kind of pretty obvious was going to happen. They clearly don't trust Swift with his injury history. So he goes to Philly. Philly was looking for the running back. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is a very good running back. Definitely the second back. Definitely a bit behind Bijan Robinson. Now, some crazy, wacky people out there were like, oh, Jahmyr Gibbs, he might be better than Bijan. Don't listen to those people. I think he's going to be a good player, especially in that offense. It's a run-heavy offense. They have a whole new backfield now, which is kind of crazy. When they were, talking about Williams and Swift last year, it felt like it was a dynamic backfield. Now you got Montgomery and Gibbs. So I expect him to get a bulk of carries. I expect him to have a very good season. It just feels super high at 12, especially when I thought there were some other needs they could have addressed. Maybe JSN at wide receiver would have been a home run there for them with Williamson being suspended and stuff like that. But, overall, I think Gibbs is a good player. He's going to be impactful. So it's not a horrible pick at all.
Here's my question from you. If you were Brad Holmes, would you have even traded down from 6, or would you have maintained that position, to pick Carter or somebody else?
I think they did a good job because they got good value for the pick. I think sliding back to 12, and the guys were, they still had guys on the board. Like I had them picking Christian Gonzalez at 6. And he was still sitting there at 12. So obviously they wanted to go in a different direction. So I don't think they really lost anybody they wanted. Carter had some red flags, I know, from certain organizations that kind of had him as a DND. Like right. The Seahawks for sure had him as a DND. Do not draft. There was too many flags for them at 5. I have that from inside sources talking about that. So I think this was the good move. They seem to do a great job at sliding back and getting value, more value than they should for the picks that they give up.
Tony, I know you and I talked about it when you were at Ford Field. You were giving us a sense for everything as far as the fan base there during the first round. But now that you've had a couple days to digest what happened, what's your take on should we have traded down, stayed, stay there, or if you want to even really dive into it, what are your thoughts on Gibbs?
Well, at 6, I've been preaching for a long time. If they liked Carter, take Carter. Mm-hmm. They didn't like Carter. I have to believe that that interview, they must have saw something, or they've got hundreds of people working for them over the course of the draft to nail their picks as much as they can. So I think they just didn't have a good feeling about Carter. On top of that, I was hoping draft night talking live. I was hoping they'd take Wilson. They didn't. They traded back. There was kind of a big sigh or a big hush over the crowd when they traded back to 12, because I'm pretty sure everyone was anticipating them taking Carter or Wilson. So when they got to the pick and, they announced Gibbs' name, I was shocked. I'm not going to lie. I think everyone in the stadium was shocked, and there was thousands of people there. But after thinking about it for a while, giving it a few days, I'm not mad at the pick at all. Like I think Gibbs, all the analysts say his ceiling is as Alvin Kamara. If we have Alvin Kamara, if they redrafted the year Alvin Kamara was drafted, he'd go in the first round. There's no doubt about it. You know how a lot of the times you'll see redraft the draft from 3 years ago or whatever. And then they put all those guys in there that are superstars now. If his ceiling is Christian McCaffrey or Alvin Kamara, I don't care that we got him at 12 instead of 18 or instead of 25. He was projected to still go in the first round. If he's who we want him to be, and if his ceiling is that high, it doesn't matter where you take him.
I agree with both of you there that, it does sound like in hindsight or listening to Brad Holmes and potentially the NFL Network or ESPN, whoever, that the Lions probably had some idea that there was a threat, one or two or more teams could potentially be taking Gibbs if they did not at 12. So question becomes, would you rather have the guy you want versus taking somebody you're less excited about just because the draft boards say, hey, it's better value? And me personally, I'm going to take the person I like and live with the rest afterwards. Yeah. But it is what it is. So, the Lions probably and the NFL as a whole watched more trades in that first round in that draft than, maybe any other draft, at least I can think of. Peter, let me ask you, do you remember a draft in your lifetime that's seen so many trades? The Lions alone, I believe, were responsible for 5 or 6 of those trades.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can tell you no, because they set the record for most trades in a draft, this draft in the common draft era. And I think they had that done by the 6th round. We weren't even in the 7th round yet when we hit that mark. And I didn't even Minnesota picked at the top of the 7th round. So I barely paid attention after that. So I'm sure there was a lot more trades flying through. No, it was very active. The first round was very active.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like a lot of teams didn't want to necessarily slide up, but a lot of teams moved back, and the teams were getting, because it wasn't any crazy, we've seen crazy payouts on teams sliding up a lot of spots, and there really wasn't that. It was good payouts, but I mean, Houston really didn't give up that much to go from 12 to back to 3, all things considered for that. So yeah, I think a lot of teams were not necessarily wanting to move up. I think a lot of teams wanted to move back, get some picks, because it was a very deep draft.
It was.
Mm-hmm.
Tone, let's talk about that real quick. You and I had speculated on a few mock drafts for seemingly forever what the Lions were going to do at number 6 and 18, etc. When we had talked about the potential being there for Anderson to drop to 6 or Carter, obviously Carter did. Mm-hmm. Were you at all surprised to see how much Houston gave up to move back to number 3 and get Anderson Jr.?
I think it was an awesome move to do that. Everyone kept saying, are they going to take CJ? Are they going to take Will? They ended up getting both of them. I don't think they gave up too much. I think they gave up an appropriate amount, I guess is the word. And especially, I mean, I think Will Anderson is a superstar. I hope I'm right. CJ Stroud, I'm not a big fan of Ohio State quarterbacks, so I don't care what he does, but I'm glad they ignored the all that testing stuff that they talked about for the last few weeks. I'm glad they ignored that and took him as a player and not as a virtual goggle guy doing C2 tests or whatever they're called. So I think they did a great job. They got both players they wanted, and their future starts now, so giving up, I know they gave away a 1st round pick for next year. So we'll see, but they have their quarterback in place. They have a leader on defense. They had a great draft last year with Stingley, and I think they'll just build on it. And the Houston Texans could contend this year. I mean, that's a weak division in the league.
It is. Well, let's go on to pick 18 here. I know, if Gibbs raised some eyebrows, I think it's fair to say that everybody had to think there was a case of nepotism going on by Lions brass when Campbell drafted Campbell. So, I think everybody agrees coming into the draft, he was in the discussion for being one of the top linebackers. But just like every, broadcast network was saying, in today's NFL, linebackers, running backs just aren't valued that highly anymore. And to have the Lions start the draft off with 2 people in these positions that are not highly valued, I think raise some eyebrows. But everybody's done their homework on these guys after months of mock draft this, mock draft that. Peter, you've seen this guy, you've talked about him. Your thoughts on Jack Campbell?
I thought this was the worst pick in the draft, honestly.
All right, there we go.
Campbell was definitely, I had him as the top linebacker for sure, but I mean, it was like a middle second round guy. I thought in the 40s you would see him go off the board. He's way tall, like 6'5". You see that right there, 6'5", 246. He's a massive linebacker. You don't really see that. Now, he tested very well, which was I was very worried about. I have this thing about guys from Iowa on their defense. I mean, don't want to be the race guy, but it's like usually slow white guys in the Big Ten. Okay, it's not SEC football out there, and I kind of worry about it. It like goes back to like Chad Greenway of the Vikings. Yeah, he was a good tackler, but he's just really slow, not athletic, and we are playing a million miles an hour right now in the NFL. It's speed is king. So I was happy to see that he tested way better than I thought he would. Had good hip mobility, but man, at 18 here, I think this is just a wasted pick. I think he was a guy that you could have easily gotten in the second round, middle of the second round, especially Detroit picking towards the top of the second round. There were much better guys on the board. Kalijah Cansey is a guy I'm just screaming at the TV like, it would be an absolute nightmare. Now I'm ecstatic they took him. Honestly, I have in the division, like it would be the Detroit Lions defensive line would have been an absolute nightmare to deal with if they added a guy like Clancy in the middle who can just, I mean, you can't double anybody and you already have two elite pass rushers who are going into their second year. It just makes life hell. And I don't know if this pick moves the needle at all on the Lions defense, which, you know, everyone's talking, there's a lot of Lions hype rolling into the season. And I just don't think it's a lot to be desired where they could have upgraded with a lot better players available in the draft.
Sure. That's why you're here, man, to give us a viewpoint from somebody not connected with Detroit. Tone, you and I have talked about it, especially after a day or so to break it down. It's my view, although I guess we'll wait and see. Gibbs is going to be used as a receiver and a running back, almost like Deebo Samuel for the 49ers. Campbell, you know, in my opinion, watching him when we got ready for the draft for a month or so, I think this guy's stock would have been much higher if he would not have played basically middle linebacker, would have been like an outside lane rusher, somebody almost like an Anderson. I think he tests much better there with his natural abilities. It is what it is. What are your thoughts on Campbell, and what do you see his future being like for the Lions?
You know, when he was first drafted, like most people, I was a little disappointed. But again, you know, once you start paying more attention to the guys that they actually drafted, I think he's automatically the best linebacker we have already.
That's saying something.
I mean, Houston as a pass rusher obviously is different, but he's more of an edge guy than a true linebacker. Correct. But I think he's the best guy, and linebacker was weak. I love Rodriguez. I love the passion, and I love everyone thinks he's a great guy. But
admit it, you love the cowboy boots.
Yeah, I love the boots. So, but he's not. You know, his rookie year he was average, maybe above average. I think Campbell plays faster than he looks. You know, being that big guy in the middle, I think he's going to take away slants. I think we don't need him to cover deep. We've got like 6 defensive backs we can put on the field at this point. So he doesn't need to go deep. He needs to just keep the short routes intact. And it seems like he's a great tackler. You know, again, we could have maybe taken him later, but technically he was a position of need. I know a lot of people were screaming Kalijah Cansey, but we have to remember too, he's not a run stuffer. He's a pass rusher.
Right.
Cansey, I'm talking about.
Yep.
You know, the one thing that we were bad at is stopping the run up the middle last year. Campbell can help solidify that, and we did get a defensive tackle later on that is like 340 pounds, something like that. I think he's on here somewhere. 330 pounds.
He's not small.
Yep. Yeah, 6'5", 330. I mean, that's the run stuffer that we need. We have pass rushers. We could put 4 different pass rushers on the field right now, and one of them will get to the quarterback without improving the defensive tackle spot.
So coming back to both of you guys here, obviously the first 2 picks raised eyebrows. I think that's fair to say. Now to start off the second round, the Lions almost doubled down on that, at least initially. And you got Laporta coming in. You know, apparently the heir apparent to replace TJ Hawkinson. You know, Peter, you got Hawk. We had Hawk. I've had some thoughts on him. Tone's had some thoughts on him. What are your thoughts on the heir apparent in Detroit for TJ Hawkinson?
I actually like this pick. It was a very deep tight end draft. It's actually pretty funny. You get rid of one Iowa tight end to bring in a new Iowa tight end, but Iowa produces tight ends. Like, there's no doubt about it. That is the one position, as bad as they are offensively, maybe the worst in Division I football. They put out studs in the NFL that play tight end. So I like this pick. It was a very deep tight end draft. So if you weren't going to get one of the top two guys, I think the next tier guys are all about the same. I like this pick a lot. He's a big body. It's just weird. It feels like Detroit doesn't use tight ends, but then they kind of do. Like, they did not use Hawkinson. It felt like enough. He flourished in Minnesota once he traded. He was putting up video game numbers out there. But you saw, I just think of that fourth down play they ran against the Jets. A tight end nobody's ever even heard of. Nobody's ever seen of. And it goes for a touchdown. So maybe they're trying to integrate it back. Maybe it's just kind of a different feel. He's a different body kind of guy, but I like this pick actually a lot. I really think this is a huge upgrade at a position that is very prominent in the NFL. That, if you don't have a good tight end, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Tone, let's talk that from a Lions perspective here. You've obviously watched the season and a half the 2.5 years that TJ Hawkinson was with the Lions. You've seen him with us. Now you've seen what the team did after his departure. Did you think the Lions needed to go with Laporta here, or did you feel like we were fine with what we had?
Well, I liked our three-headed monster at tight end last year. I thought James Mitchell had a decent rookie year when he came back from his injury. The other guys, Brock Wright and the other guy, they all combined and did well once TJ left. But if you look at all the elite teams in the NFL, they all have elite tight ends. Yep. Like, tight end is a big deal in the NFL nowadays. As much as I didn't want to admit it, I took a look at, Kansas City has Kelsey, Kittle in San Francisco, Goddard in Philadelphia, all the playoff teams, well, not all, but almost every playoff team, at least that went the Final Four, let's say, they all have elite tight ends. So I think it's important to address that. A lot of people were, still mad about this pick too. Why did we take this other tight end? I'm like, well, because they valued this tight end higher. Michael Mayer was still available, I think, or Mayer, however you say his name.
I would say Michael Myers, isn't that the guy from Halloween?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So there was other tight ends on the board still, but this is the one that they like I said, they have hundreds of people on their staff that interview these guys, that talk to these guys. The head coach, almost every coach on the team played in the NFL. They know what they're doing.
Right.
So if they like this guy more than they liked Michael Mayer, then you take this guy. And I did think going into the second round that we were going to take a tight end with one of the second round picks. So I'm glad we got him.
Just food for thought here, and make of it as you will. Last year, Goff had 6 interceptions, I think, for the season. 4 before TJ got traded, he had 5 interceptions. Only 1 came after TJ was traded. And did you know, out of those 5 interceptions, 4 of them came on throws to TJ Hawkinson. Little footnote for you there. So shows you how numbers can be altered and skewed at times. But let's move on from that, and let's go on to probably one that I don't think anybody can say something bad about this one. But Branch coming in to, the Lions moved up to get him. I was real surprised myself that the Green Bay Packers even helped us get him. But Peter, let's talk about this. Since you're the Minnesota fan and you got Green Bay involved here, you got Brian Branch coming to us via trade. What do you think about this kid?
First of all, so they talk about the Vikings trading in division. It's now Detroit too. It feels like we've unveiled a monster that everyone's trading in division now. I absolutely hate. I don't know what Green Bay was doing here. Brian Branch was clearly the number 1 safety. Easily, I had him going 24, I think, in my mock to Jacksonville in the first round. This is a home run pick. The fact that he even fell this far is a little surprising. Now, he's a little undersized, 6 foot, under 200 pounds for a safety. Little undersized, especially for what he brings to the table. But this is an impact player, impact starter, really helps cover up the back end, which wasn't the best in Detroit. Obviously, we know got beat sometimes over the top. That it's a no-fly zone now with the secondary pieces. So this is a home run pick. Green Bay, good job, Brian Gutekunst. You're really running a tight ship over there. So yeah, great pick. Love this pick. Probably the best pick for Detroit in the draft.
Tone, you've seen this kid. You've seen how safeties are being used more and more, not in just the league, but definitely in Detroit, where we're basically playing 3 safety sets. Okuda last year, I actually thought was his best when they played him as a / weak side backer safety, especially in that Dallas game. Obviously he's no longer here, but talk about the Detroit defense with a wealth of safeties they now have.
It's almost sick. I agree that these guys, Brian Branch, I think was probably the best pick of the draft for them. He was supposed to go in the first round. He was rated the #1 safety. I've read a lot that they might be playing him at nickel, which is fine. I think Tracy Walker right now might be the odd man out. Funny to say, he was just in the Pro Bowl a couple of years ago, but he did have an injury. But Kirby Joseph, I think, is just going to be better than he was as a rookie, which is saying a lot. We've got Sutton on one side, we got CJ, we've got Mosley, now Branch. I'm like, it's so crowded. Like last year we couldn't, maybe not necessarily last year, but the year before we were starting like guys off the street because we were so depleted at defensive back for safeties and corners. And now we have it's an embarrassment of riches almost. I'm not saying any of them are all pro or Pro Bowl caliber, but it's improved. I say our defense is going to be at least top 20 this year, which is still a 12-point improvement over last year at the least, since we were rated last year. Branch is going to be an amazing player. I would like to see him bulk up a little bit more, especially if he's, depending on where he's going to be, but
sure,
get about 10 more pounds on him. That would be ideal without losing speed, of course.
So here's a theory I've got, and I'll throw it at both of you guys real quick before we move on to the hooker selection. It's my opinion and just a thought that Campbell was selected specifically because of his size, weight, and the fact he can clog up the middle against the run, which is something that mauled Detroit at times last year. Just like with this, the one defensive tackle that we did take, Martin, seems to fit that same scenario. I think with the amount of safety play we now have and upper echelon, it's my opinion you're going to see the Lions have a base defense with 1, maybe 2 linebackers and 1 or 2 safeties on the field a lot of times. That gives you coverage ability and a little bit more flexibility against the run, especially out wide. You guys have any thoughts on that?
That makes sense. You got to hope, like you said, the interior holds up a little bit. It could give you a little vulnerability there, but not many teams run the football. I mean, even look in division, like Minnesota, they claim is going back to the running game. I'll believe it when I see it. Chicago doesn't run the football with it's not Justin Fields, so everything is spread with him. And Green Bay, who knows what that offense is going to look like this year with Jordan Love. So, I mean, if you got to cover more, you're going to cover more people, it looks like, in the division. So, yeah, play a hybrid defense, put 6 DBs out there, especially, DBs that can tackle. I mean, the secondary, you got safeties that can tackle. So, they got to play linebacker, play them at linebacker.
Tony, any thoughts on that before we move on to the next one?
No, I agree. A hybrid is definitely, if we only have 1 linebacker out there and 3 safeties, that's fine because the league throws a lot more than anything. And I know as much as I like Anzalone, he did struggle in coverage. Rodrigo, it wasn't much really of a cover guy. And like I said, this guy at least clogs up the middle. He might not be able to sprint down a seam with a tight end for 30 yards, but he's going to be able to stop all those short routes that quarterbacks like to throw. I saw a comment earlier that Aleem McNeil, maybe he has a bounce back year. Last year was supposed to be his breakout year and it just didn't happen. Was that his fault or was that because the whole defense was horrible? So maybe he has that breakout year this year and we're not even talking about needing a defensive tackle halfway through the year. I think there's just so many weapons that we can throw out there at once. We talk about Hutch and Houston a lot because they were such amazing rookies, but having Okwara back fully healthy, I think is going to be a big deal. Harris is back as well. Charles Harris, he was hurt most of the year after his breakout year. Maybe he's the odd man out though. Kaminsky's back. Pascal, not to brag, but I got to talk to Josh Pascal at the draft party.
All right, brag away, man.
he was one of the players that were walking around, and I said, "Hey, man, how you feeling?" And he's like, "I feel great." I mean, obviously, he's probably going to say that to anybody that asks that question, but the guy's a monster, by the way. I mean, he was, I barely came up to his shoulder because I'm not obviously a tall guy, but he was very, and I'll say he was like one of the most polite guys I ever met. He's I got to imagine he's going to be a power to be reckoned with too. So we've got a lot of interchangeable pieces on that line, and I think we're going to keep offenses guessing. They're not going to know who's coming from where. They can't double team everybody.
Well, we've got it looks like over 90 in the chat, or excuse me, watching on the stream, pushing 100. If you guys could, don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps a lot. Keep the comments coming. If I don't see it, just make sure you post it again. I'll try to get to it as quick as I can. So here's the big thing going out throughout Detroit. I'm sure we're going to see tons of Hooker jerseys being sold because Detroit's got hookers. Obviously this is a pick. Some had speculated, Hendon Hooker would be a first rounder. I know, Peter, when we were doing your mock, I had him going to Tennessee at number 11. It didn't happen there. Obviously, Tennessee did go after a quarterback, but what do you think about the Lions being able to pick up someone like Hendon Hooker in the third round?
This makes a lot of sense. Now, the funny thing is Hooker's going to be 26 and Jared Goff's only 28. So there's not much of an age discrepancy here, but obviously there's a world of difference in the experience with this two. This is an interesting pick. I was surprised he fell this far, especially when there were like 12 quarterbacks taken in this draft in between the first 4 rounds or whatever it was. Like quarterbacks started flying off the board in the middle late rounds. So I was surprised that we had a huge gap between the first 3 and then Levis, obviously the big story falling here. I think this is a good pick. Obviously going to sit this year. We'll see how Goff plays. And if they feel like Goff isn't going to take him over the top, they're going to roll with Hooker. He's got no guaranteed money left on his contract. Goff, I'm sure he's going to want a new deal after this season, especially if the Lions deliver any sort of the hype that's going around them. If they make the playoffs, win a playoff game, Goff's going to want a big fat contract saying I can do it. And I would be hesitant if I was Detroit if you see, well, we run into Philadelphia and it's just we're worlds apart here at the quarterback level, because Hendon Hooker has the potential to be a transformative quarterback. The problem is Tennessee doesn't have an NFL offense at all. Guys were running wide open for them, and you don't see that. Even the best teams in the NFL, you rarely see guys running wide open. It's all contested catches. So good pick here at 3. He's going to sit a year. The hype will maybe simmer down a little bit, and that'll help out Goff, especially because I think Goff's kind of a fragile human being when it comes from his confidence standpoint. And like the fans aren't going to be calling for Hooker this year. And if they are, they don't know anything because he can't play. He's got no knee. So I think this is a good sit and wait pick. Typical Detroit. They seem to be, very, very savvy in the middle to late part of the draft, which is what makes good football teams. And it's probably what is different from most of the times. Maybe questionable early picks, but very strong in the middle and late of the draft. And that's what makes good football teams.
Tone, tell us, what do you think about Detroit running a Hooker?
Well, I'll tell you, I was watching with my wife at this point, and when it came up to them, it says pick is in. I turned and looked at her. I go, I think they just drafted Hendon Hooker. So, but that was the first time all night that I thought they were going to draft him. But I thought it was a great pick. We talked about drafting a quarterback, in the later rounds, but come round 3, that guy was still available instead of like the guy from Tulane or the guy from Stanford,
right?
Or the UCLA guy that they all got drafted later on. But if Hendon Hooker, who a lot of teams had rated as the 3rd best quarterback in the draft, obviously with the injury, he wasn't going to be the 3rd quarterback drafted, but him being around in the third round for us, I think is a great guy to put in, to take and let him sit for a year, maybe 2 years with Goff. You know, Goff does have 2 years left on his contract. If Goff has another season like last year, we're probably going to keep him another year, you know, because now his contract isn't that expensive, right?
Right.
When we first
He'll
got
just
him,
want
like,
them.
oh, he
He'll
costs too
demand the
much.
guarantee. He'll
What's
demand
that?
guaranteed. He'll
Oh
demand
yeah,
guaranteed
right.
is the problem.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So I think it's a great pick. I don't know who else was available at that time, but since we knocked out the needs earlier, I don't think it was a bad pick at all.
Yeah, I mean, Hooker seems to be incredibly accurate. You look at his stats even under pressure, and he still completes over 60% of them. He's mobile. He's got an arm. And yeah, I do get he turns 26. I believe it's in January, if I'm not mistaken. So really, by the time he's potentially a starting option for Detroit, he's going to be 27. But in today's NFL, where you have Rodgers at 40 and he's going to start, you know, obviously Brady is an outlier at 45, and he was still starting. But Warren Moon pushed into 40. I think there was a number of other quarterbacks that were highly effective in their late 30s, maybe even 40. So if Detroit can get 5 or 7 years of value out of this guy, play at a high level while keeping the cap number down, at least for his first couple years, when he could be potentially a starter, I mean, that's a huge win for him. Even if he's just solved the backup quarterback position for the foreseeable future and Goff remains, now they have options there. So, anyways, let's move on from that and let's get on to probably one of the ones not a lot of people saw coming. Lions, Brad Holmes, the master of trades, apparently on this draft, makes another trade late. I think a lot of us had already tuned out for the night, and Broderick Martin comes to Detroit. Depending on who's reporting his weight, he's somewhere between 330 and 350. Seems to be not the greatest for as far as pass rush, but it's going to be hard for, I think, any single blocker to move that kid off the ball and open a lane. Peter, you're looking at this guy trying to stop your offense. Tell us what your thoughts are on him.
Well, it's a problem for my team because our interior offensive line is the worst part of our team by far. I think size is always good. You question a guy who played at Western Kentucky. That's a smaller school, obviously. Yep. You're not facing elite offensive linemen. So I think the top tier linemen in this league they'll have the ability to move him around a little bit because they're used to moving wide loads like this. This is a man's league. But if he can play at that 350, that's a problem for people to deal with. But the question is, can he actually play at the NFL at 350? You can get away with that at Western Kentucky. You may not be able to get away with that in the NFL. But a rotational guy, I can't imagine he's going to come in and start right away. But anybody run situations, short yardage situations, just bodies in general. He has good. I watched the tape that ESPN put out of this. It was actually funny. We're like randomly talking about this guy watching. He has decent tape. Like he's definitely a load in the middle there. He's hard to move. And you need depth in the secondary, depth on the defensive line is how you are good in this league. So more depth. They needed defensive tackles like we talked about. It just helps them out overall, but that's a big man. I just think 6'5" him, 6'5" Jack Campbell, just hands up. Even if you just put your hands up, that's not a throwing lane over the middle of the field for any team to deal with.
All right, so let's keep going on here. Tone, what do you think of this kid?
I'm a fan. I was like everybody else. I think I went to bed before they made this pick because I was like, oh, this is over and it's late. I want to go to bed. So when I got up the next day and found they traded a couple of fifths to go up and get this guy, I obviously had to check him out. Like I was saying earlier, when people wanted Cansey, Cansey's a pass rusher. He's under 300 pounds. The comparisons to Aaron Donald are stupid because just because he went to Pittsburgh and they're little guys doesn't mean anything. Aaron Donald is generational talent. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame. This guy, can clog up the middle. He can take on a block. He can take on two guys maybe in the interior, especially when we're playing Minnesota, apparently. So, but that's what we need. That's something we didn't have last year. He's a 2-down guy. He's not going to be there on 3rd and long or on passing downs. We don't need him to be. That's like you were saying, rotation is key, rotating the defensive line in and out every play for matchups and down and distance is a big deal. So if he's a run stuffer and he keeps guys from running all over us like Carolina did last year, Carolina, I always think is the team that knocked us out of the playoffs because we got embarrassed after our big, our win streak was ended because we couldn't stop two guys that weren't even, I don't even know if they were on the team at the beginning of the year, the running backs.
Right.
So on the Carolina team. So, if he comes in there and does his job for, I don't know, 20, 30 snaps a game, that'd be a great steal for us.
Yeah, I'm sure he's going to have to go through a little bit of training with Detroit staff this summer, throughout the preseason. I don't think he's going to be a finished product by any means, but that size, can he give you 8 to, I don't know, maybe 14 meaningful snaps in the game? If he can do that his rookie year, at least on those snaps, assuming they're probably more than likely, short yardage situations, that kind of mass can make an impact. So we'll see what shakes out. But now moving on to the last couple of picks here, we got Peter. You might not know much about this kid. I know I sure didn't. Colby Sorsdal, the 6'6" and 300-pound guard tackle, if you will, out of William Mary Tribe.
Well, at this point in the draft, you're looking for depth. Maybe guys you're hoping that are going to make the team, but it's kind of a crapshoot. If that man plays guard at that size, good God, like that's like 6'6" is so big. Now I know the NFL has moved towards some bigger guards. I know Minnesota's guard is like 6'5", Ezra Cleveland, so they're moving to some bigger guards. They're feeling more comfortable playing. Peter Skoronski at the top of the draft, another guy who's 6'6", who's going to play guard probably. So I get it. It's all about depth at this point. I mean, you're looking for depth, guys. If it's a body, it's a body. Injuries happen. Nobody's going to go through a clean season without injuries. If you can get competent snaps from guys that you draft at this point in the draft that can fill in, if it's 10 plays for the game because, somebody gets nicked up and it's not a dumpster fire and causes you to lose a game, that's all you can really ask for an offensive lineman this late in the draft. There's a reason linemen are available this late. Linemen are probably the easiest position to get down. If you're a top-rated lineman, there's a good chance you're going to hit. And if you're at the back end of a lineman, you're probably a career backup. It's not like other spots here. So there's a reason here. But playing at a small school, sometimes those guys do get lost.
Tone, what do you think of this kid? Is he just a camp body potential cut, or do you think he's actually got something?
I think he's a camp body at this point. If he makes the team, I'd be surprised. And that's just because we have so many guys there already that were all on the team last year. Maybe he bumps one of the practice squad guys off. I don't think, especially we've got very decent depth at backup, even with a lot of guys that have started many games in the league. Like we brought Glasgow back. Nelson's still there. I think if he does, everyone says they're moving him to guard for the NFL instead of tackle. So he is a big guy for the guard position for sure, like Peter was saying.
Dan Skipper was what, 6'8"?
Skipper was a giant. Yeah. I don't see him making the team, but if he does, that means someone else is getting bumped, like Logan Sternberg or someone like that.
Right. But I think that's the biggest thing where 2 years ago there was no competition for roster spots. You got drafted, you were probably making it. Now you're seeing guys that are returning players, let alone the drafted players, probably gonna have to fight for some spots here.
Oh yeah, that's
all
a
right.
good problem to have.
Right, it's a sign of growth. All right, last pick here for the Lions, Antoine Green, 6'3". Obviously, he's not A.T. Perry. I was sad to not see the Lions get him, but hey, 6'3". Runs a sub 4.5. Peter, you got anything on this guy, or you just think, hey, he's a long shot looking in, trying to maybe make the practice squad?
Well, receivers in this spot are always kind of long shot. It depends. I mean, it really is. Do you have a good camp? Because we've seen a lot of receivers come out of nowhere. I think Antonio Brown, was a 6th-round pick out of Central Michigan. He guys can make the team. This guy can fly for his size. He was a home run threat at North Carolina. North Carolina kind of switched to passing the ball. Obviously, Mac Brown loves running the football down there in North Carolina. So they were run heavy, but then they kind of realized, we have an NFL quarterback, so maybe we should sling the rock. So they did open up the passing game. He ran, Josh Downs was the number 1 there. He was kind of their number 2 guy, especially. So you just don't know with these guys. If a guy runs a sub 540 and he's 6'3", put him on the team. Let's see.
Right.
Like, who knows? If he has great hands too, even better, because it's just a home run threat. And like you said, we got multiple guys cut, multiple guys suspended at the wide receiver position. So it's a thin room right now. He could definitely make the team.
Tone, what do you think of this kid?
Yeah, I mean, he's got as good a shot as any of the other guys, I guess. Wide receiver. The only thing with him is, and I don't know this at all, generally the later guys in the draft have to have special teams ability.
Right.
I don't know if he is that guy or not. I think we already have our punt returner and kick returner set, but that could change. I don't know. So I don't know if he did that at North Carolina or not. But I think he's a long shot. Just because we've got a pretty good wide receiver room already.
We do. So we've got almost 130 watching. If you guys could, if you haven't yet, hit the like button. I mean, you guys know the drill. It helps us out, all that stuff. So let's get from the draft now to talk about how we think this is going to impact the NFC North. Peter, you get to talk a little bit of Lions here. You get to obviously pay attention to your own team, the Minnesota Vikings. If you had a pick right now, and I get we still have months before preseason games even begin, but how do you see the NFC North shaking out?
Okay, so I have to look at the schedules. Obviously, I think that's coming out in May. It people would be surprised. It really matters when you play people in this league. A lot of the time, you catch a bad team early in the season, they can beat you. You catch them at the end of the season, they've given up your role in that team. So it always matters on the schedule. I don't think Chicago is going to be any good. I thought they had a very mediocre draft. Their first pick I thought was the worst of the tackles. I would have taken Broderick Jones there for them. So I don't know what Chicago's doing. They were so bad last year. I mean, Justin Fields is still hit or miss. We'll see. Chicago, they got a wide receiver now. I don't think Chicago's a threat. Does anybody in this room buy Jordan Love? Because I sure as hell don't. He feels like at best Andy Dalton, maybe. I mean, maybe he gets to like a Dak Prescott level, but we're really pushing it here. I think he's kind of an average quarterback. I don't think Matt LaFleur is a very good coach. He hasn't shown he's a very good coach. Aaron Rodgers carried that team. When Aaron Rodgers was a little down, he was bad. He's bad in postseason games. He's got a bad record. I don't think he's a very good coach. I think this is a blow-up project. So it's really Minnesota and Detroit when it comes down to it, which I think everyone has. Now, Louis Riddick was talking wild at the draft. Wild. I don't know if you guys heard that. He guaranteed a division, guaranteed an NFC Championship game appearance, and said probably the Super Bowl for Detroit. It's really hard to win playoff games in this league, especially when not a damn soul in Detroit has won a playoff game. I mean, Goff, okay, maybe, but there's no coaching there. There's no it's really hard to get over that hump, to figure this out. I think it will depend. I would lean Detroit, but that's really hard. It's been 30 years since they've won the division. Yeah. It's a really hard thing, but they showed a lot of promise. I think that Green Bay win at the end of the season really means a lot to the franchise. It means a lot to the team. It just sets the tempo that we're going to play no matter what. I think Dan Campbell's a good coach. Went to my alma mater at A&M. He's a fantastic guy. He'll bite kneecaps every which way on Sunday. So I think this is good. I would lean Vikings and Lions, and I think it's really close. It's probably both teams are about 10 wins. I think we kind of pull back, and Detroit gets to that 10-win mark. So I have both teams in the playoffs, and it just depends how the schedule breaks for as far as who's walking away with the division and that home game.
Tone, I got to ask you, when Wayne Fontes was fired, he left a curse upon this team that has remained since he was booted out of the Silverdome. He promised the Lions would never win another playoff game during his lifetime. Is this the year Cocaine Wayne's curse is finally lifted from this franchise?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So, it is a two-horse race. It is Minnesota and Detroit. Obviously, Minnesota had a great record last year. Some crazy comebacks, and they improved their offense. At least they got a first-round wide receiver that
we will score 40. We'll score 40 every game. We'll score 40, give up 50. So
right. So like I said, I still think we improved the defense with the offseason pickups and the draft. I was telling you a couple days ago, Dano, that we already have a top 5 offense. If our defense can improve even slightly. We don't need a top 5 defense. We don't need a top 10 defense. Maybe a top 15. We just got to stop people a couple of times because we can't be stopped. You know, we showed that the last 8 to 10 games of the year, we scored a lot of points. And when we didn't score a lot of points, we still held the ball, ran the ball. We kept the other team off the field so our defense didn't have to play so much. Getting into the playoffs, winning a playoff game, I think it's going to come down to definitely need to win the division and get a home game for the playoffs. I think that would be the best way for all these young guys, all these guys that have never been to the playoffs, to be more comfortable if we could get a first round game at home.
You know, Jamison Williams, I believe, before his knee injury, was clocked running the 40-yard dash, and somebody can help me out and verify this, but I want to say it was at 4.27 seconds. That's Holland. And then we know Gibbs was just clocked at the combine at his fastest time, I want to say, was 4.35. Don't hold me to that.
All right.
But I think there's going to be a lot of situations where you're going to see those two and St. Brown line up wide on one side. So that's going to force some team to play man. And, boy, I feel bad for the DBs assigned to that triple set coverage.
Yeah.
Lions are going to be able to present, I think, some problems for teams offensively. But like I think both of you just alluded to, it's going to come down to that D. That D doesn't get stops like, you know, in the Seattle game last year. We didn't even force a punt. It's going to be tough in Detroit. All right, let's move on to, you know, Peter, what do you think is the biggest sleeper in the NFC? Who would be the biggest sleeper team to potentially emerge and challenge either Minnesota or Detroit?
All right. Well, sleeper, this is a tough one because I think, you know, Minnesota, Detroit, no chance of Green Bay and Chicago. You look at the East, I mean, Dallas is 50-50. They improved their defense. What are we going to get out of Dak? What are we going to get out of the run game? The Eagles obviously got a lot better, and they were already the best team in the NFC, so it's a real tall task for us. I'm really intrigued with Carolina, honestly. It's a very poor division. They were competitive last year. They were real close to winning that division if it wasn't for the one game against Tampa and Brady put it together. So they could be looking at a home game in Carolina. You get a home game in Carolina, you play a weak schedule. I'm a big fan of Frank Reich. I think he's going to turn that team around real quick. I love Bryce Young, by far my favorite quarterback in this draft. He's a winner no matter what you say about him. He wins football games. So Carolina's a team I'm very, very intrigued with moving forward. Seattle, they made the playoffs. I mean, what are we going to get out of Geno? But they got a lot better too. That defense is getting back to Legion of Boom territory, and they added the best wide receiver in the draft. So Lockett, Metcalf, JSN, good luck. Put Tyler Lockett in the slot. I'll take it every day, twice on Sundays. So I think Seattle and Carolina, I think, is going to be the most surprising team. They could get to 10 wins, win that division, home playoff game, and they could be like Jacksonville was last year.
Tone, if you got to pick somebody, you know, not named Detroit, to make it to the Super Bowl from the NFC, who are you going to pick?
If we're talking Super Bowl, it's definitely going to be the Eagles. If it's not Detroit, you know, San Francisco, I still think they have a quarterback situation. I mean, Purdy was a great storyline at the end of last year, but let's see what happens when he plays a full season, if he's even the starter. You know, they still have Trey Lance there. So, but those two are probably the top two teams in the conference. As far as sleepers, though, I would look out for the Saints too. I think Derek Carr is gonna light some people up. I think he's pretty ticked off that he got, you know, unceremoniously banished from the Raiders team. So I think Saints could have a big year this year.
Well, they're in a division where it looks like it's up to grabs, so we'll see what comes out of there. But Peter, you know, we're going to wind this up here. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your channel?
All right. So first of all, thank you guys for having me. It was a lot of fun. I love talking ball with anybody, even if we are rivals, essentially at this point. It's all good fun. We're not the Packers or the Bears, which we all hate the most. I run a channel. It's called After the Review Sports. We kind of do daily news stuff. I cover new stuff. I think my last video was on Dion and the whole situation in Colorado there. So I do more news stuff. I cover every sport, try and stay more topical. During the season, I cover football, live stream every Monday night game, we live stream the draft, trying to do more of that stuff. We also do shorts, stat fact of the day. You learn a new stat about something crazy, makes you sound smart at the water cooler. Be like, hey, did you know this? Like, hey, so I love that. So yeah, check me out after the review sports over there. I think we just hit 1,400 subs. So
Hey.
and appreciate your chat. I was reading the chat, y'all. Your chat was pretty good. They were very nice to me, and they know their stuff. They definitely know their stuff. So yeah, shout out to the chat.
Well, Peter, obviously we're going to play your team at least twice this year. So if you'd like to come on the week before and we can talk a little bit more football, we can do that. Love to have you back. Tone and I are looking for a couple more locations. Obviously, everybody got to watch us at Stadium Drive Liquor Store last Wednesday, the day before the draft. But we are working on a couple live locations across the state of Michigan. We'll keep you guys updated when we get those released. If the first Lions game or the season opener is on the road, we're going to try to set up a real nice live output for you guys to come out and see us potentially at a local restaurant in Southwest Michigan. And again, if we can arrange that, we'll invite you guys out. You can be a part of opening day with us. So anyways, Peter, Tone, I want to thank you guys for coming on in. Everybody in the chat, hey, we'll see you next Sunday for the next Lions Talk live broadcast, 6 to 7 p.m. Make sure you set your notification to remind you about it. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comment section. You guys know I'll go through and respond to them. And we'll try to orchestrate whatever that question may be or if something you'd like us to do in the next week's broadcast. Otherwise, take care. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening. And we'll see you next time on Lions Talk Live.
What's up, Mike Kimber?